Today, I have a treat. I have a doctor of psychology. This lady is a friend that I met at one of my business events. And when I heard her speaking and talking about psychology and the challenges that people have, I heard her and I knew she was the one to speak to a loved one that I had. And today I want to welcome Linda Weigand. Did I say that right?
Weigand.
Weigand. I should know that I would botch that. But Linda's going to share with us some of the things on, kind of how people think. I talk about communication skills and personality styles and how that affects how people think, act, and respond. But Linda has actually studied psychology. She is a doctor of psychology, and I know she has a lot to offer us today. Welcome, Linda.
Thank you. Thank you so much for having me, Connie.
Well, one of the first things I want to ask you is if we're looking at people, since this is the extraordinary marriage,
Mhm.
if we're looking at people, what are some of the maybe the top three problems that couples have in marriages that you would think of?
There are a lot of problems in marriages, but I would like to address what the core issue really is.
That's the best way to go.
Because we can say it's intimacy, we can say it's unmet needs and expectations, we can say it's finances, we can say a lot of things. But from my 25 years experience working with couples and talking to people, and understanding their personalities and understanding their communication style. So the core issue to me is connection. And we can't have connection without communication, without good communication. So whenever I would see couples, the very first thing I would do in the first session is give them a skill to take home with them called love talk. It's a communication skill. And I didn't care if you were the president of a company or who you were. I was going to tell you about this skill because we can talk to people in business, we can talk to colleagues, we can talk to everybody just fine. But when it comes down to talking to the people we love most, it's the most difficult. We sort of lose our minds in that situation. And I will tell you, I have an adult daughter that's 35 right now. She is my challenge. I can talk to anybody in the whole world. I've been doing this for 25 years, but to talk to her and help and get her to understand and keep calm, is a whole another story. And I have to myself keep bringing myself back to, okay, these are the skills you learned, implement these skills.
Okay, so I'm going to say that just in the last couple of months, I had a similar type of incident that I also had trouble having patience and using my skills that I know. And so when we're put in that place, like we can tell people we know exactly what to do, but when we're put in that place, emotions and
Mhm.
feelings start to come into place. So all I can figure is that when it comes to a man and wife, the problem is really opening up and being able to really share your heart, what you need or
Right.
what's bothering you. And there's a lot of people who just can't open up. What do you do about that?
Well, I just keep encouraging those people. You have to look at the benefits. What's the purpose of opening up? What is it that you want to get? What is it that you're not getting that you need? What are the needs? What are the expectations? What is the value you're not seeing? What is the inequity in the relationship? What are all those things, and how can you benefit by just using some very simple communication skills? You know, um, I like this quote. I wrote it down from Brene Brown because she says, we talked about connection. She says, connection is the energy that exists between people when they feel seen,
Hmm.
when they feel heard, and
Mm.
when they feel valued. And to me, that's love talk. Listen, understand, validate is the communication skill I teach. Listen, you're being seen because you have to look, you need to look at that person. You need to have eye contact, not communication over the phone or over texts or anything else, face to face. You're being heard, that's being understood, and then being valued is being validated. And that's the part that we don't do very well. So, really the short answer to your question, Connie, is that if we want someone else to communicate well with us, we have to model that for them.
Hmm. Now, Linda, sometimes that's hard because if one person is explosive or totally not sharing, then it's hard to, if you start to get frustrated, you become reactive.
Mhm.
And now it's hard to model that behavior that you know that you should be having, right?
Well, I think what happens is if you recognize really in the communication skill, if you recognize that something is starting to escalate, you call a timeout. When you use I statements and we're not pointing the finger and blaming, or, you know, creating some kind of a situation where it's the other person's fault and they have to change and they have to do, and we use words like you did da 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 da,
Mm.
or why did you do da 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 da. Those are huge defensive triggers. So we can model in a way that we go, okay, we're not going to push the buttons, because when we're with somebody, we pretty much know what their triggers are. When we can use the I statements and we can say things like, you know what, I'm concerned about such and such, or I'm confused about something, or I'd like to know more about something, and I'd really like us to be able to talk. But if emotions have already escalated, you just have to time out. But in a timeout, because of personality types,
Hmm.
as one person wants to get it done and the other person wants to pout for 3 days, you know, you just want to be able to in that communication, be able to say, you know what, we need to stop now because this is not effective communication for us. But we can come back to this after dinner, or we can come back to this over coffee in the morning. The some people need to know, when are we going to come back to it? So that's a really important key issue, is you have to interrupt that process, because you're all, in the emotional, trying to regulate the emotions of it all, and you can't even think about what it is that you want to say that's nice. We can think about lots of things to say, but not the nice things.
That's when we have to hold our tongue.
Yeah. So, I mean, there's a lot of different ways to be able to model good communication for the other person. And part of that modeling is creating your own boundaries. For example, I won't stay in this room if you're screaming at me. We can come back to this later. We're going to have to take a time out. I won't do this. Things like that, in a nice way, but in a assertive way. So it's not aggressive, it's assertive, but there are various different things like that that we can model, where the other person typically, if they really want to connect and they want to communicate, a lot of times they will back off, or they'll start to realize
Well,
what's.
uh, just a week or two ago, I had a lady named Jackie, and she was sharing parenting tips. And she
Mhm,
had a list of 60 things that you could say to your kid because, so often we say things in a reactive
mhm,
manner that gets us in trouble. And that happens with children too, whenever they're reacting to something. And it's really kind of the same thing. And so I thought, wow, those 60 things are really good for adults
mhm.
also, because we say things that we don't really mean because it's a heated discussion and we're frustrated. But one of the things was, I love you too much to respond to that. And I thought, I love you too much to respond. I love you too much to continue this argument. I love you
Mhm.
too much to continue this. Let's just wait till we're cooled off. But, that takes an assertive person to be able to stand up and say that in the moment.
Right, right. It takes a very strong person, and it takes courage to do that,
I
because
used to wouldn't have had that.
you don't know what the outcome is going to
Mhm.
be.
Yeah.
But when, sometimes, like you said, we're saying things to hurt because we're hurt. Over the weekend, I'll just tell you this, I have a 5-year-old grandson, and he likes to say things like to trigger me. So he said, I'm not coming back to this house anymore. I don't like you because I didn't let him have sugar or something. I don't know. And I said, honey, I said, That's okay. You don't have to come back, but it would make me very sad. And he immediately backed off. Instead of me saying, well, you shouldn't talk to Nona like that. And, stuff like that, the
Hmm.
you pointing the finger and everything. It was just like, well, this is how I feel about it. You can make your own decision. And so a lot of times we have to do that as adults too, is just be able to back off and not get so hooked into the engagement, especially when it's negative.
I like that. Really, we just have to act like adults. But,
Mhm.
so what do you think whenever a person does go and pout for 3 days or maybe a week or that kind of thing? How can you handle that? Do you think they're just wanting attention?
Well, part of it is personality style. There are certain personalities that pout because, first of all, they need to process a lot, and then their feelings are hurt. And if their feelings get hurt, they just kind of want to write you off. But when you're in my counseling office, I just say, you know what? It's not okay for you to pout for 3 days. If you want to pout for one, we'll let you have that, you know, and this person wants to resolve things immediately. So really you come to an accommodation with each other that, no, we're not doing this for 3 days because the other person is just losing their mind wanting to get this issue resolved. So, but when you're not in the counseling office, just to be able to say to that person, you know what, I really struggle with not being able to help you or help the situation. I really struggle that we're not connecting, and I really want that for us. I don't use the word pout, but when you isolate
Withdrawal.
3 days, yeah,
Hmm.
withdraw. Thank you.
Yeah,
When you withdraw
withdrawal.
or isolate for 3 days. So there are ways, from my perspective, there's ways around all of it. I think the one part that's the most difficult when I was looking at some of the things about, reminding myself about some of the things about marriage, one of the things that's really difficult to do these kind of, to practice these types of skills with are when you have addiction issues, and things like that, where people are not rational, they have a skewed perception of things like that. But that's a whole different story than what we're talking about. But I'm sure that there are some people out there, thinking, all right, so my partner would never go for that because he's irrational or she's irrational, some things like that. But we have to kind of take responsibility for how we are reacting ourselves and learn how to respond and not react.
I think whenever you're talking about communication styles, that is, you hit it on the head, is learning how to respond to your spouse, understanding what kind of personality they have, understanding their communication style. Are they going to get angry when you respond? Will they just let you respond in any manner, say any old terrible thing, and they say nothing? Um, so there's all the different styles and how we respond. And so I totally agree. But Linda, it's hard to respond well when it is emotional and it hurts your feelings, or it's a scary situation, or whatever. It's hard. Like I can be proactive all day long, but then whenever something hits my emotions and I'm frustrated from it, I've learned, in my head, all these things go around and round and round. Anybody like that?
Yeah.
I think I need to say this and I'm going to do that, and it's going round and round and round. But my common sense says, don't talk to anybody when you're mad.
So the other thing too, Connie, and this is really hard for us to kind of wrap our heads around, but when somebody reacts to you in an angry way or reacts to you has some negative reaction to you, we don't recognize that that's not about us. That's about them and whatever issues they're struggling with and whatever they're going through and whatever emotions and thoughts are running through their heads. And it's very hard for us to go, okay, let me put that back on them. Um, and I'm not owning that. That's not mine to own. And so sometimes if you can put yourself in that place to say, let me give that person some grace, let me give that person some space, because they're obviously struggling with something and it's not mine.
Yes.
So
And
that's really difficult.
I have said those exact words. In fact, if I was coaching someone, there's many times I've said, well, no, that this is not about you.
Mhm.
No, that this is not about you. And I would hammer that in because it's so very true. But whenever I got into a situation unexpected, then I had that emotion come into play. And I
Right.
was reminded, God has a funny way with this sometimes. I was reminded that yes, I really do know that's not about me. But then it's like it hurt my feelings. And 1 minute I was mad, and 1 minute I was feeling for the person, and I was back
Mhm.
and forth so much that it really reminded me, about those emotions and the effect that has on us.
Mhm. There's a funny little tool that I do with some of my clients, because we don't, everything that happens to us, it automatically goes to the emotional seat of our brain. That's the first place it goes to, the amygdala. But we have to get it to the prefrontal cortex, right? So we can have a cognitive process going on and not just emotion. And that's why little kids struggle so much with emotional regulation, because their cortex is not developed.
That's
Right?
right.
So sometimes I've had this work with clients. It sounds silly, but as soon as they recognize that they're getting that hit to their amygdala and they're just stuck in their emotional regulation, I make them take their hand right here and go, whoop. Okay. So basically they're getting a visual of, I'm taking it out of here and I'm putting it here so I can start to think. And like I said, as silly as that sounds, it works for a lot of people.
Okay, so for people who are listening to this on podcast and they
Mhm.
can't see Linda, let me say she's taking her hand on the back of her head, the back of her neck, and she's coming around and putting it on her forehead. So, Linda, what is in the back of my head, my neck? What is that? I know.
Amygdala, the,
Oh, that's where that
the
thing
emotional
is in
seat
my
of the
brain,
brain.
huh?
Yeah.
Okay, and you're putting it in what? The front of my head to make
The
sense of it and
prefrontal
think,
cortex. Yeah.
to make a better decision.
Right. To make it cognitive. So you have a thought process going on, right? And you can think it through, and you can process options and whatever else we need to process with that information that came in that hit us so hard emotionally.
We know, as I mentioned whenever I introduced you today, that we were at a business meeting and you were the
Mhm.
speaker. And I don't remember what you spoke on that day, but we know whenever there's a need in our life somewhere and we run into that person, because to be honest, like I'm not always the most trusting person. So, and I kind of have that spirit where I can decipher if somebody really is a good person or if they are trustworthy. And as
Mhm.
you spoke that day, and there was a need, and I was like, wow, I didn't know you before that. And that's been probably 10 years ago. But I
Mhm.
thought, wow, she's the one I need to hook up with, this person who needs this. And I just remember um seeing that need, feeling that need, and being glad. But I have to tell you, Linda, before that, like I think I've had like that oh, I was in Mary Kay for 30 years, so I like to
Yeah.
call it the pink bubble. So I think I have had that life in the pink bubble, you
Mhm.
know, protective parents, protective husband, my kids rolled along very nicely, just very little conflict, very little trouble in life. And, I really didn't understand that sometimes people have stuff they can't control, or they came from a background, a childhood, problems in childhood or teenage, or parents splitting up, or there's
Right.
so many different kinds of things. And that I didn't really believe in counselors. I would hear people go, well, I've got to see my counselor for this, and I got to see my counselor for that. And I thought, good grief, like, what do people need counselors for? I don't really think you need that very often. But then as I entered the world, and I saw other problems and things going on and things that touched me, I was like, oh, wow.
Yeah.
People need people. People need people who know more than they do. And I just remember that day I was touched by your talk. Can't tell you what it was. And that's that's the thing is we remember how somebody makes us feel.
I think that that talk was, I called it demand performance, kind of like command performance, but the demands that are on our life and how all of that stress affects us, and just dealing with everyday issues. And I think that's what it was in that group.
Wow, girl, you got a memory. I'm telling you, if you can remember that. You know what I remember is that it was a long meeting and that you were the speaker. And I thought, oh my goodness, that poor lady, because our program and this group has gone so long. That poor lady, and
Right.
people are ready to go. But then you started to speak and you commanded the audience. You were
Oh,
great.
thank you.
You were great. Yeah. So, you know what? So, talking about stress. So, what are some ways that we can know that this is not about me? This is about this person, something in their background, their past, or they're stressed at work or something else. What are some ways we can recognize that?
I don't know that you can really know what's going on, but I think we all recognize when people are stressed just because of the way their body language, the way they talk to people. We get kind of snarky and things like that, and don't sometimes we don't treat people very kind, and we're grabbing for coffee, and just all of this kind of stuff because we're just trying to get some relief, some kind of self-medication for ourselves. So I don't know that what can be going on, but I think that the best way that we deal with people is we know something's going on, we recognize it, we can't fix it for them. They have to get the help that they need to be able to fix it. But Connie, we can be kind people. We can show people mercy and grace, in situations where we know that they're not acting appropriately and there's some underlying cause, and we can be warm and compassionate with people. And a lot of times what I see is we just blow people off like that, you know.
Well, I think a lot of it's awareness. I know in my younger days, I had no idea. And I would never think about anything not being about me. That sounds
Mhm.
bad, doesn't it? But that's how most of us are. We're thinking about me. We're thinking about how things affect us. And I was unaware. And so that's one of the big things is to be aware that
Mhm.
there is a problem and that it's probably not about you. Or you know what? It might be about you. Maybe that spouse is reacting or having some challenges and then you are reacting and
Mhm.
you might be the problem. We never think it's us.
Right.
But through the years is like especially after I started in 2004 studying the communication styles, it was
Mhm.
like my eyes were open that
Right.
there are all that people are very different but very predictable if you understand those communication styles.
Right.
And once you understand those, then you can understand that it's a stressful reaction. In fact, I remember learning about myself because I thought, I'm nice to everyone. I
Mhm.
certainly intend to be.
Right. Right.
And one day I was reading on some of my materials and it said that my personality style when it gets stressed, I bet you already know this because you know disc, it gets sarcastic.
Mhm. Mhm.
And
Right.
so now, like, I've recognized that. And usually it's only with family because, I wouldn't want to be that way with anybody else, right? Just in the household, right? But I started to realize that I got sarcastic and but still, when stressed, that sarcasm still comes out, right? It's
Mhm.
really looking for help. It's really reaching out for an answer. I don't want to feel that way.
Well, you want somebody to know there's something wrong here. And that's the way it comes out, is you're not your typical self. You want somebody to know because you want some help or you want some compassion. You want somebody to care about what it is that's going on with you. So it's your cry for help, basically.
And really, Linda, that person who is angry and that is their response, they're angry. It seems like it's about you, but it's really about them. And they too really want to be able to resolve that. I mean, nobody's happy when they're yelling, right?
Mhm.
Yeah.
one of the core sources of anger, I'll say two core sources of anger, and I see it most of the time, is frustration, which comes from unmet needs and expectations. That's what it's all about. So we go back to that communication skill. When we can communicate that our needs are not being met, or we had some expectations that aren't being met, or, and when I grew up in my family, we did things differently, and I expected you to take the trash out, but you're expecting me to take the trash out. Some simple tasks like that, really, people hold on to that and they get, all kinds of feels about that and create a root of bitterness over sometimes silly little things just because it's not communicated.
Absolutely. So, what's the simple thing on that? To stop and talk about, okay, let's divide up these chores.
Mm-hmm.
Let's divide up the things in the house and let's see, what do you like to do?
Right.
What do you not mind doing? And divide it up. And otherwise, things don't just happen without anybody talking about it, right?
Right.
Well, I
Right.
think one other reaction in that, since we talked about anger and my sarcasm, uh, another one is that withdrawal. And the people who withdraw from things, what just tend to not want to do. It's like the person with anger can be direct and
Mm-hmm.
they tell you just like it is, and they probably hurt your feelings. But that person who withdraws, nobody knows what's the matter. Is there a way that we can talk to somebody to help them open up?
um yes. And it comes back to what I said a few minutes ago. It comes back to being the type of person that they feel like they can connect to with trust. And then they're more likely to open up, because basically what's happening is they're withdrawn, but they're internalizing everything that's going on for 3 days. And there's a lot of negative tapes playing in their heads,
Hmm.
lots of negative thinking that they're putting on themselves and taking responsibility and blame for things that aren't, like, I must be a horrible person, or I must be so terrible, or I'm not lovable, or I'm not worthy. We have all of these negative tapes that we play. And the longer that person stays in that space, longer than 3 days, and it keeps going on, they're developing depression. They're starting to develop anxiety because fear is creeping in. What if this marriage doesn't work? What if she leaves me, he leaves me, whatever? So we have all of this stuff going on in that space for 3 days, and we can really narrow that down. Sometimes people act like they don't want to be around you, they don't want you to touch them or anything like that. But I have found on lots of occasions that when people say, just leave me alone, and they pout for 3 days,
Mm.
sometimes you can just give them a hug, whether they
Anyway,
want a hug or not.
that's right.
And just kind of open up that warmth and that space for them to go to start that trust and realize that this is a positive connection.
Absolutely. That's wonderful advice. I remember when my husband and I were dating, and when you first start dating, everything's new, you're getting to know each other, and maybe you go on dates and you do things, and then the next thing you know, like they're like always coming over your house,
Mm-hmm.
at your house, sitting on the couch, if they want to smooch or something.
Right.
But like they're always at your house. And so I was not straightforward. And I kind of attribute that a little bit. Well, there again, personality styles.
Mm-hmm.
But I also attribute it to, like if I was mad or upset, I wasn't allowed to share that in any way.
Right.
Keep your mouth shut or you were in trouble.
Right.
And I think that it's important sometimes to tone of voice, body language, like you were talking about earlier, to
Mm-hmm.
share things. But, I had learned to close up and not tell my feelings. And so I couldn't tell my husband, which we were dating then, I couldn't say anything. And so I thought, after a little while, I thought, I don't really like him anymore because I'm not having any fun anymore. I know it sounds shallow, but hey, I was 17, 17 or 18 years old. So I'm like, I'm not really having fun anymore. So I think I'm going to break up with him. And my mother really liked him. And so she never butts in usually. And I think I shared this on another one of the first podcasts, but it's she did not say anything to me, but when he came in, she said, Jeff, I think Connie has something she needs to talk to you about.
Oh my goodness.
Oh my goodness. And, I never gave my mom dirty looks. I was very respectful, but I know she got one that day because I was like, I could not believe she was putting me in that place, backed in a corner. That's why I felt like I was backed in a corner.
Mhm,
And
mhm.
so, that day he continually said, "Well, what's the matter? Nothing. Well, what's the matter? Nothing." And isn't that what we do?
Right,
Nothing.
right.
Nothing's the matter. And he still knows to this day if I go, nothing, there's that certain little sound, you know.
Mhm.
And he kept on and he actually got mad and he's not a very angry person at all, but he got really mad. And so I finally started spilling the beans and you know what? Immediately it was resolved. He's like, wow, well, that's not a big deal. We could do. So sometimes we make, a mountain out of a molehill and
Right.
back ourselves into a corner and ruin a relationship or we just lose out whenever we do that. But you know what? And he's never been able to shut me up since. Because that's freeing to be able to tell
I
how you feel and not
exactly,
bottle it up.
because you said, I couldn't say anything.
I couldn't.
Actually, you chose not to say anything because you sounds like you were afraid of the consequences, right?
I don't
What you were expecting something else other than a resolution, right?
No, I think that, I was actually at peace with breaking up. And so it was extremely hard for me to open up and let him know with words. Unbelievable now that I couldn't use those words, but to let him know that I was not happy with the situation. I just couldn't. And so, you think, yes, it was a choice. I know that. I couldn't until pushed to do it.
Right.
Yeah. So, mother made a good choice that day.
Yes, she did.
I
You
am
be
very
thankful
thankful.
for it.
So once in a while we need to butt in, but not always, but once in a while we
Mhm.
need to butt in. Well, Linda, I want you to share with everybody because you were talking with me beforehand and we were talking about how you spent, around 25 years working with couples and that kind of thing. But you are also doing something new. So I want you to share what you are doing and how your audience today can get a hold of you if they're interested.
Okay. So what has happened is I have kind of an amazing weight loss journey. And it's not the weight loss journey that's amazing, it's the ability to have a sustainable lifestyle. And so about 5 years ago, I started incorporating that into my practice. And so I've been transitioning out of just counseling. I became a certified nutritional therapist. And I have a signature program right now called My Lifestyle GPS. And, Lifestyle GPS is really all about just creating a roadmap for yourself with healthy lifestyle habits that create sustainability and long lasting results. And this is my passion. This past week, I have a book that I published that just came out. So it's on Amazon. It's called The Keys to Unlocking the Mysteries of Your Weight Loss Journey. And basically, the subtitle is Things That I Learned That Really Matter in Creating a Sustainable and Healthy Lifestyle. So I do have a website. It is insideoutdynamics.com. And Inside Out Dynamics is the name of my practice. But I am transitioning now, and no matter what I do, we know that in weight loss and any other kind of changes, lifestyle changes, habits that people make, that psychological component is always there. So it's not that I'm not doing counseling anymore, but I'm not doing it as a counselor, right? Typically, I have very few counseling clients. So I'm servicing my clients as a lifestyle strategist. And so that is how I present myself now, because what we do is we just look at what are the things you're struggling with, what are the things that you want to improve in life, and we create a strategy to be able to do that so you can live life better and healthier. And for the most part, most people want to talk about weight in their health journey.
I love that. And it is inside out. And about 5 years ago, whenever I first moved in this direction myself
Mhm.
as a coach, um, my first program that I did was called Inside Out. And it was really talking about confidence
Great.
for women,
Mhm.
and inside out. And I mean, I could tell you, I'm an old ballet teacher. And
Oh,
I have always been fitness minded. And in my young days, I exercised. And I mean, I always jazzercise, Zumba. I mean, I was always doing something. And now, when I really need it, because a few pounds have found me and they won't go away, um, I don't really want to exercise anymore, but I am a little bit. But yeah, but it truly is. We eat our feelings,
mhm.
whether they're happy or sad or bored or whatever. So, um, you know, I certainly see nothing's more important than our life. We got one life to live, right?
Exactly,
Yeah,
exactly. And our
nothing's important
country,
than life.
I'm sorry, I didn't mean to interrupt,
Oh,
but
go
our
ahead.
country is in trouble as far as health and nutrition and fitness and all of it. And that's why, I've developed this passion to share this information with people because there are things that we can do, and but most people don't know what they are because they're so confused, about everything that's out there and you don't know what to do first. So, um, it can be very, very simple. Sometimes it's not easy for people, but it is very simple.
And it's looking to someone who knows something more, something that you don't know. I have this saying it is, we don't know what we don't know
You know?
until we realize that we don't know it.
Right,
And we can't do anything we don't know. We can't act out anything we've never seen. And it's finding somebody who knows more than you and get help, right?
right,
Get
right.
some help, live your best life. Thank you, Linda, for being with us today on The Extraordinary Marriage. And you guys can find all her information in the show notes on theextraordinarymarriage.com/podcast. Right there where her podcast is. I'm also on Apple and on Spotify, but you will find her notes and how to contact her if you want to know more about her. So thank you, Linda, for being here.
Thank you, Connie. It's been such a pleasure for me to share.
Awesome. All right. Thanks for listening, guys. See you next week.